Introduce our speaker. This is Shara Smith. She is an occupational therapist who has additional certifications in driving rehabilitation. She and I worked together a long time ago in the hospital, and then she got this really cool certification. So we're excited for her to kind of share her knowledge about how to see a certified driving rehabilitation specialist and what things that we should be looking for in adaptive vehicles. So I'm going to pass it over to her. You can put questions in the chat. If it's pertinent to what she's saying, we'll stop and interrupt her. If not, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So we'll turn it over to Shara.
All right. So again, my name is Shara Smith. I'm an occupational therapist and a driving rehab specialist. So I've been an OT for over 17 years, and I've been doing driving for about the last five. I was trained in a program I live in Bozeman, Montana, same area as Melissa, and I was trained with that program and then decided to start my own business in the last year and a half. So I started seeing patients in January of 2024. Um, so that's a little bit about me. All right, so objectives today, we're going to talk about what is driving rehabilitation, some adaptive equipment that is out there to help with driving, and then where you can find a driving rehabilitation specialist in your area. I understand that this is a worldwide organization, correct? And so a lot of my perspective will be from the United States and where I live in Montana, but there's several organizations that are also worldwide that really help with that search of finding the right person for you. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about driving services that are out there right now. So there's community-based education, and you think about your driver's education maybe that you go through your school. Or there are some driving schools in the area as well. Some of these are free, or some of them have a small fee. And then there's medically based assessments, evaluations, and referrals. So you're thinking about your doctor, your occupational therapist, your physical therapist that's doing an assessment and an evaluation and referring you on to somebody specifically for driving based on your needs. And then there's a specialized evaluation and training. So that would be someone like myself that has additional training and driving rehabilitation to really figure out what would be the best fit for you for driving. Are you safe to drive? What adaptive equipment would be helpful? And then training you in that. All right, so driving rehabilitation helps individuals facing challenges caused by physical or cognitive impairment or age to achieve safe, independent driving or transportation options through education or information dissemination. Professionals who work in the field often use adaptive equipment and modified vehicles to help people get out in the community and be independent. It doesn't always have to be that the person with the disability is driving. They can also help set people up to be safe passengers in a vehicle or help them access public transportation in the area that would be safe for them as well. So who performs driving evaluations? So someone with a professional background in healthcare or driver education. So they have additional training in the field. Some examples are occupational therapists like myself. There's also some physical therapists, physical therapy assistants, or recreational therapists that have that background in healthcare and then get the additional training. There's also just regular clinical driving instructors. Like my dad was my driver's education teacher growing up, and he had a background in education. So there's areas where people then get additional training in um, the medical part of that. So cognitive or physical impairments that could affect driving, and then they get the additional training in that. So a little bit of both. And then a driving evaluation. So this consists of a clinical assessment and an on-the-road test. So A lot of different driving programs are set up differently. Sometimes you might go to a clinic and do the in-clinic there and then get in a vehicle of theirs, such as at an outpatient clinic or a hospital-based system. My program is mobile, so I block about 3 hours of time for a driving evaluation, and I go to the person's home and do the clinical assessment right in their home. So I assess their vision, reaction time, cognition, range of motion, strength, basic traffic signs, and just their general safety awareness, judgment, decision making, that sort of thing in that clinical assessment. And then we would go out and drive after that. So I drive myself. It's a 2016 Subaru Outback. I have an instructor side brake in it or a passenger side brake. And then mine is set up with some adaptive equipment to help people to drive safely if they might have deficits or impairments that make driving a regular vehicle difficult. So, in that clinical assessment is when they're really going to figure out what adaptive equipment would be best for you to help you with driving and get that set up in place. So, the second part of that evaluation would actually be going out into the vehicle and trying out some of that adaptive equipment. You oftentimes start in a parking lot in a very controlled setting to just figure out how to accelerate and brake. All right, and then the driving rehab specialist decides from that evaluation how much additional driving training you may need. So sometimes if it's a basic piece of equipment, you're able to get it all done in one session. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 follow-up sessions, and those could be 1 or 2 hours depending on your endurance. And sometimes with the higher tech programs, people might have to travel a long ways to access these programs. So they might actually block off a week of time for them to do an evaluation and just stay there and learn all that high tech equipment if you're having to travel a long ways away. Oftentimes, how I do it is I do the evaluation and then I might see somebody once a week for 2 to 3 weeks for 1 to 2 hours at a time based on their endurance, going over that equipment with them. So then, after you figure out which equipment would work best for the patient, the driving rehab specialist would share that with the driver and the referring physician. And then they write an actual prescription, just like you would for medication or to get a wheelchair of exactly what they're recommending. Left-sided push rock, hand control, and a spinner knob, for example. So they would share that with the patient, the physician, and then they would take that to a mobility equipment dealer to get that piece of equipment in their car. Um, so similar to if you've ever had to go through the experience of getting a wheelchair and how there is someone that helps you um, get fitted for the wheelchair, maybe a therapist, and then there's an actual wheelchair dealer that you purchase the equipment from, similar to that in the driving world. Um, and then driving is interesting, and each state has different rules and regulations as well to get licensed with adaptive equipment. Where I am from, we kind of joke it's the Wild West. There's the laws, there are no laws. Really, if the doctor says you're safe to drive with it, you're safe to drive with it, and then you have to pass a test with the motor vehicle department. Other states are a lot more strict with different types of adaptive equipment. You might need 6 hours of training with a driving rehab specialist or something like that. So each state is a little bit different. Okay, so then we'll go into the different kinds of driving programs. So there's basic programs, low tech, and high tech. So a basic program offers driving evaluation and training without equipment. So this would be somebody that basically has kind of like a driver's ed vehicle, a driver's instructor vehicle. So they really just have that passenger side brake and they are seeing if someone is safe with driving with all of the regular controls. So that is just a basic program. They might recommend some additional mirrors or a specific seat cushion, but that's a basic program. The next option is a low tech program, and that is what I would say most driving rehab programs in the United States are. And that is what my program is. So it offers adaptive equipment for primary or secondary controls, such as hand controls, a left foot accelerator, a steering device, that sort of thing. So it's adaptive equipment, but it's pretty basic equipment. So the primary controls are the gas and the brake and the steering function. So these are vital for making your cars go. So those are the primary controls. And then the secondary controls are things like your horn, your headlights, your turn signal, your windshield wipers, that sort of thing. So low-tech driving programs offer evaluation, training, and education with or without adaptive equipment. And so, they offer options for the primary control, and those are often mechanical. So when we talk about hand controls or spinner knobs or adaptive equipment with that, we're not really changing anything with how the vehicle starts or stops. We're just providing like a mechanical source to make it happen. So the brake stays the same and the gas pedal stays the same. You're just putting on an extra long lever to make it go. Um, Whereas high-tech programs are actually changing the computer systems within the vehicle. Okay. All right, so they can address transfer, seating, and positioning. OEM stands for original equipment manufacturer. So if you're driving from the actual driver's seat made by the vehicle, or if you were to drive from the wheelchair, and they can help make recommendations with securing your wheelchair and systems for that, and then ramps to getting in and out of the vehicle as well. All right, so examples of primary driving control. So a mechanical gas or brake hand control, a left foot accelerator, pedal extensions, um, park brake lever, electronic park brake, and steering devices such as spinner knobs. So I'm going to show some examples of these. So this is a spinner knob. So this helps for driving with one hand. So that could be because you are only able to drive with one hand because your other arm is affected possibly by your disease process. Um, but it makes it very easy to steer with one hand. I always recommend a spinner knob if somebody is using a hand control. So you're controlling the car on the left or the right side, and then you're steering the vehicle with your one hand. There's so many different options for spinner knobs based on grasp. So this is on the left, it's a very common spinner knob. Then there's a single pin, there's a tri-pin, there's a million different options based on your grasp. Okay. And then on the left side, you can see that there's a hand control. It's almost blended in pretty well, but this is a left-sided push rock hand control. So you're using the right hand on the spinner knob to steer the steering wheel. And on the left side, you're using a hand control. So you push to brake and you rock back to accelerate or go. So instead of using your feet to control that, you would use a control on your arms to do that. There's another setup on the right side that's just a different version of a hand control where you're using more of a push and a pull uh, to make the car go. But again, you can see those levers and how they're going to the accelerator and the brake. So the accelerator and the brake really aren't changing that much. They're just creating levers on them to help you to reach them and access them easier. Okay, so this is a left foot accelerator. So if something's going on with your right leg, it basically just puts an accelerator on the left side. So you would accelerate with your left foot on the left side of the brake, and then you would brake in the middle. Um, so very similar setup, but you would just drive with your left foot instead of your right foot. A steering wheel extension. So again, if your range of motion makes it difficult for you to reach out to the steering wheel, it basically just brings it closer to you. So it's just an extension of that to be able to turn the wheel easier. And same with a pedal extension. So um, it's just a device that you put on that regular brake or accelerator, and you are just bringing it a little bit closer to you. So if you have range of motion or strength deficits that make it difficult to reach that option. All right, so then secondary control. So again, we're talking about the horn, the blinker, the turn signal, the windshield wiper, the gear selector, the ignition for turning on the vehicle. Although we have a lot of push start vehicles now, I don't know how much we use keys anymore really to start our vehicles. So the top picture is a turn signal extender. So typically to operate your blinker, your turn signal on the left side of the car, you go down or up to operate the turn signal. Well, if you have one hand on uh, hand control, sometimes it's kind of scary to let go of that to reach out to the turn signal. So this one, it basically just provides a lever to be able to do it on the right side, easier. And then that bottom picture, it's called an RF Mini, and Sure Grip makes a bunch of different spinner knobs, and these ones are actually electronic and go into the wiring system of your vehicle to operate those secondary controls. So you can have your hand on the spinner knob to turn, on your steering wheel, and then you can just reach out with one finger to do your left-sided turn signal and then another finger to do your right-sided turn signal. You can also set that up for your windshield wipers to adjust the temperature in your vehicle. You can do it for your high beams and your lights. So again, it it limits that taking your hand off of the steering wheel to access those secondary controls to just make it easier. Now, that's a pretty simple one. There's a much more complex one where you could have every bell and whistle imaginable on there. Okay, so then the high technology driving program. So again, I do not do this kind of driving program, and there are a lot fewer of these options around the country, but they're out there and they do amazing things. So this enters into the computerized systems and advanced functional mobility options. So the ramps to get in and out of the vehicle, it's actually getting into the power steering of the vehicle, so there might be low effort steering in the vehicle or driving with a joystick, which is pretty cool. So even if you don't have great strength or range of motion in your upper body, but you're able to drive a power wheelchair with a joystick, you could be able to also operate a vehicle with that joystick, which is pretty incredible. Okay, so primary driving control options. So the powered gas and brake systems. So again, the varying effort of the steering systems is a big deal. And then there's also horizontal steering. So we're used to steering like this, but they can actually create something where you're steering like this. So again, that takes that gravity away and easier to control with people that have strength or range of motion deficits, especially in their shoulders. And then you're also able to drive with joysticks, which is pretty cool. So for the secondary controls, they also can have just like touch pads right next to that joystick where you're able to operate all those secondary controls. So again, they're really getting into that vehicle and changing the wiring and the electric system uh, to be able to do all of that with just a touch of the button. And they're able to really adapt it for what that person needs. I don't think there's like a ton of off-the-shelf options for high tech that I'm aware of. They're really adapting it for each person and what they specifically need. So there's a couple of setups that I showed you. So on the left side, Again, that's a different kind of like a holding device. It's a tri-pin where you would put your hand in between those three pins to hold. So again, they're using that to push and pull for a hand control. And then on the right side, they're using that side for a actual steering device. So again, that's more of that horizontal steering versus on the actual steering wheel. And then they have a touchpad for all those secondary controls. So a blinker, a windshield wiper, that sort of thing. I would imagine they have all sorts of Bluetooth um, and options where you can talk to this device and have it put your windshield wipers on or turn on your turn signal as well. And then the next picture is somebody driving from their actual wheelchair. So that is an option as well. So sometimes people will drive from their power chair or their manual chair. Other times, people will use a ramp to get into their vehicle. They'll park it and secure it. And then they have a seat that turns, the driver's seat, and they do a transfer in the vehicle and drive from the driver's seat. It's my understanding and the education that I got that they always try the best they can. If people are able to drive from the OEM, original equipment manufacturer, if they're able to drive from that seat, it's ideal because it's been safety tested the best. When you think about the crash testing with the airbags and things like that, it's ideal. But for some people, it's not an option. I know I trained somebody with hand controls recently, and he really wants to drive from his chair. And it takes so much effort for him to transfer that there's no point of him learning to drive if he's so tired by the time he gets behind the wheel. So he'd rather take that risk because he wants to get out there and he doesn't want to waste all of that energy on the transfer. So I think it's very case by case about what's going on with you and what your needs are. And then that's an option of driving with the actual joystick. So similar to how you're driving a power wheelchair with a joystick, they set that up to actually be able to drive with one. To be honest, I don't really know how they're able to do the turning and the accelerating and the braking all in that one place. It looks like they're able to do that, but I am not exactly aware of how they do that all in one place. It sounds complex, but um, they do it all the time, so it's pretty cool. All right, so the other thing I want to go over with you guys is where to locate a driving program because honestly, for someone that works in the field, it's challenging for me sometimes to find people to meet the right needs because we are in rural Montana and there's just not a lot of people in this field. And so ADED is a really good resource for anyone looking into anything with driving. So that's our National Driving Association. It doesn't really make sense. It stands for the Association of Driver Rehabilitation, but the acronym is ADED. So apparently the acronym is old and they kept the acronym even though the words changed. So that's why that is. Um, and I am gonna just take you onto that website so you can look at how to look somebody up. So we're on the ADED website, and then you're going to find a provider. So you're going to go to member search. So those members are people like myself, the driving rehab specialist that belong to this organization. And then you're going to scroll down. So there's people that have the CDRS, so the Certified Driver Rehab Specialist certification. So again, I don't have that certification. That's a goal of mine to get but you have to take a test and get so many hours of continuing education additional to the training I already received to do this. So it's a goal down the road, but I would imagine almost everybody that works in high tech has their CDRS because it's very specialized. But I'm going to go right here. So I'm just going to look for anyone that works in the driving rehab field. So you can look in any country and you can look in your location. So I'm going to just put in my location just so you can see. And then we're not even going to look for the type of program option we're offered. We're just going to look who does it in Montana. And then three names come up, and then I'm one of them. So that's how you can find people. The tricky part is I know that there's more people in the state doing this, but they might not all be members. But I think it's a really great place to start. And you have a name, you have a contact, and then if they're not able to help you, they're able to connect you with someone that can. This driving rehab world is pretty small because there's not a lot of people in the field. The other thing that I wanted to look at, so for instance, I'll show you this. This has come up. I wanted to find a high-tech driving program, and I'll put in Montana so you see there isn't any. So what that looks like. So there's no records that match that. But then I had to go all the way over to Washington, and I think that might be the closest one for us. And if you just put it, oh, Washington. So there's different options here. So if you need the basic, the low tech, the high tech, mobility equipment dealer, whatever you need, you can type that in and find that. So again, that's the only one in Washington that offers the high tech services. But I do think it's a really great place to start to kind of figure out where your needs are. Okay. All right. And then the other great website is the NAMIDA. So the NAMIDA is the national organization for the mobility equipment dealers. So they're the ones that are converting the vans and doing the ramps and the wheelchair securing and getting you set up. So when I write the prescription and say, this patient benefits from a left-sided push rock hand control and a spinner knob. They're able to look at that prescription, figure out what vehicle would make the most sense for you to be in, or if you have a current vehicle you want to put it in, and they're able to install the equipment and then also help you with that process of if you don't have a vehicle, what would be the best option for you and your needs. Okay, so finances is a big deal with driving. So unfortunately, in the United States anyway, driving is not seen as a medical necessity. So Medicare, most other insurances just follow along with what Medicare does not see driving as a medical necessity, so is not covered. A lot of programs are paid for out of pocket, but there's also vocational rehab and independent living programs that are funded state by state. So it's very different in each state, the funding and what they have. I know when I go to driving courses, there's some people that work specifically with voc rehab doing just driving rehab, and they go all over their state and they help with modifying vehicles and doing the driving training and getting the equipment in place for people, whether they're driving or they're in the passenger of a vehicle. Um, and then there's also, I found this Alliance financing program. So again, they're not giving you money for the equipment, but they're providing financing solutions at low interest rates. Because some of these, if you get a converted van, that can be very expensive. And then if you need a lot of adaptive equipment in there, it is a cost. There's also options if you get a brand new vehicle, like say you get a Toyota Sienna for a van, and then you adapt it for a ramp and hand controls. If you do that within 12 months, they will give you a certain amount of rebate money, $1,000 to $2,000, something like that, for the adaptive equipment. And most um, car manufacturers will do that. The other thing, when I looked on ADED for other supports, it seems like it's pretty disease specific when it comes to driving on the ADED support websites of who helps cover things. Like there's something specifically for people with multiple sclerosis or specifically for people that have spinal cord injury. So I'm sure, Melissa, you have um, more information about maybe financial resources or things specifically with your organization that could help with that. I also know in my state, there's an option, I'm sure this happens in a lot of states, for You can get adaptive equipment paid for. And again, there's interest-free loans that help with that. And so I do think that there's a lot of organizations out there that will provide some support. It's just knowing where to look and go.
Yeah, I'll plug our program. So we, with our Quality of Life Awards program, adaptions to your vehicle is something that you can apply for. So the Quality of Life Award cannot be used to purchase a vehicle, but it can be applied towards these sorts of modifications or getting a ramp or something like that to your vehicle. Our next application cycle is in July, and we do applications every July and January. But this type of thing is something that could be applied for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's my presentation, and I wasn't paying attention to the chat. Were there any questions?
There are no questions yet, but this is a great time to open up. So if you do have questions, we'll give you guys a few minutes to put them in the chat. I guess I have a basic question while we
Yeah.
wait. When we think about younger kids that are hitting like 14, 15, 16, and traditionally participate in like driver's ed programs through their high school, are driver's ed teachers like qualified to do any sort of these things, or would a parent need to seek out like more specific training like someone like you?
So I think it's just super helpful to first try, if you know that you are interested at all in driving, to see if you can just be a part of the education part of it in the classroom, because I think that is invaluable. When someone comes to me at 19 or 20 years old and has never went through driver's education, and now there's really no resources as an adult to get those kind of programs to learn the basic rules and road the regulations of the road, that just means they have to spend that much more time out of pocket, possibly with someone like myself, right? So if there's an organization that's free where you're able to learn even just things in the classroom, I would definitely take advantage. And I do think it just is really the comfort of the driver's education instructor. And I think resources are limited, right? I know my dad, I lived in a very small town. He was our driver's education teacher, and they did get hand controls for an individual that needed it and tried it out because this individual didn't want to pay out of pocket for someone like myself. So they kind of did whatever they could to adapt the vehicle for that person's needs. But I do think every district and school district feels differently about that for sure. Um, but when I've reached out to in Montana, the Drivers Education Association, to see, is there a gap missing? Could I help more people? They kind of said, our drivers education instructors are very well trained and they can do a lot of these things. I do think that might be more with learning disabilities such as autism, ADHD, that sort of thing, more than adaptive equipment. I would guess most places would not do things with hand controls or adaptive equipment and would refer on to more of a specialist. But I think definitely take advantage of that education setting to learn those basic rules and regulations if you're even considering driving, because that just sets you up for success when you're ready to get out there.
Absolutely. Thanks. And we do have a question from Evelyn in the chat. I'm going to let you read it if you can see the chat. If not, I'll read it to you.
I cannot see the chat if you don't mind
Okay.
reading
Yes,
it. Great.
absolutely. So she says, if a decade after my initial evaluation and vehicle modification, I need to acquire a new vehicle, would I need to go through the evaluation process again? Related, how would I access my vehicle prescription after a decade?
Yeah. So I think what's tricky about that is you might, if your body has changed and you have changed, you have different needs, you most likely would have to go through that process again because you might need completely different adaptive equipment, if that makes sense. And 10 years is kind of a long time. Um, but there is the possibility of returning to that place where you got the evaluation and say, here, I went here 10 years ago. I got this equipment. My disease has progressed or changed in this way. what could I do now? And because they already know you, they have your history, they know what's working, there might be a quicker, simpler fix in the process for doing that. Um, so it might be less of a cost if you're concerned about that. But I do think you'd have to go through the process again because it's just a long time. And the reason you're doing it is because something changed.
And Evelyn added right at the end that she moved to a different state in this process. So my best recommendation, and Shara could add to this, is that you would reach out to who did it initially and have
Yes,
them transfer your medical history, medical record, and medical information to a new driving rehab program in your state. Similar to if you change
definitely.
primary care doctors or anything like that, it's a similar medical process.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, like if you think of wheelchairs, you're able to get a new wheelchair every 5 years, or that seems to be kind of the theme of it. And I know if you have a major change, sometimes you can get one before then. So I think it also just depends on that payer source you are using. So if you use something like Voc Rehab, and it was 10 years ago, and now there's been a big change and your current equipment isn't working, I would think that's very good reason to go back to Voc Rehab and see if you could get something covered again. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And Evelyn, I would not think it would be deleted after 7 to 10 years. Usually medical type things like this like stay around. Like your chart doesn't
Yes.
go away. So it should live somewhere. And you should reach out to whoever did your initial evaluation.
And even whoever did your evaluation, and then also who installed your equipment should have that prescription too. So either one of those places should have that. Because I don't think that most people that are like NAMITA certified will not install anything on a vehicle unless they get that prescription. Um, and those are places that I would go to. Again, in Montana, we live in the Wild West and not everyone has those certifications. And I go to people that I trust and know, but I mean, that is the gold standard. But I mean, I'm sure there's several people on here or around the world that live in more rural areas that are not close to cities that have all these really strict standards. And I just know here, you you use what you have and you do the best you can with what you have. Yeah.
We have an additional question from Kim. She says, for a person that has restricted movement of their neck, are additional mirrors needed? And I know this is something that people who do drive with FOP have used. So could you talk a little bit about extra mirrors and how that could
Yes.
be helpful?
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't put that in the presentation. That would have been smart. Anyway, there are mirrors that you can put right on the rear view mirror, and it basically you can clip onto it and it basically widens your view and it helps so you don't have blind spots. There's also those little tiny blind spot mirrors that you can put on your side mirrors. The other thing that's kind of cool about technology is it's so much better at alerting us in our blind spots. So we have things that can ding at us or little lights that can come up. You can put on additional mirrors. But just because somebody has limited neck or cervical range of motion, I've worked with several people that are able to compensate in other ways, oftentimes by additional mirrors or those features on new vehicles. Right now, on newer vehicles, they have cameras kind of all around the vehicle, and they're alerting you when something's coming up in a lane and a blind spot behind you. And so if you have an older vehicle, the other cool thing is some of those safety features you are able to just add on to your current ones. You don't always just have to have a new vehicle. Like it's so easy now to get a backup cam. If your car doesn't already have it, you can purchase one and install that. So, getting those extra features, so safety features, if you don't have a brand new vehicle, is also super helpful.
To kind of add on to that, I like recently rode in a brand new car, which is something I definitely don't have. And it didn't just alert as you changed lanes, it actually turned on a camera when you turned on your blinker so you could see where you were going in both directions. So similar to a
Yes.
backup camera, but it was a lane change camera.
Yeah,
So
and it
it was
showed
just a
right.
regular old new car.
Yes. And so these are things that are not adaptive equipment, right? This is just newer smart technology that maybe was designed specifically for someone that wasn't able to move their neck great. And then they're like, hey, this would be good for the entire population to prevent accidents. So I think more and more that is happening with our technology with vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any more questions? We'll give you guys a couple seconds if there's more questions to put in the chat. Otherwise, this recording or this presentation is going to be recorded. We'll put it on the IFOPA YouTube channel. And we also, Hope and I are working on revamping and adding additional things to our website. So all of the links that Shara shared in her presentation will go on the driving page that we have on the IFOPA website. And then we'll share the recording of this presentation as well as the link to that website if you haven't accessed it before in our upcoming community emails.
Great.
Yeah, so we'll just wait another minute, make sure somebody's not typing.
Okay.
All right. So we will call that a day. But again, thank you so much, Shara, for
Yeah.
sharing this information with us. And we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And again, if there's other questions, just please feel free. You can reach out, email, or whatever, and I can get back to people as well. So, thanks for letting me come and share more about driving rehab. Thank you.